My name's Sullivan, and I look after FP&A solution consulting here at Unit4. And today we've got a very short amount of time, so it's going to be quite a lot of detail in quite a short amount of time. But here's the agenda. This is what I'd kind of like to touch on. It's kind of tip of the iceberg stuff, really. So a little bit on the positioning of FP&A. I think that's a very important thing to get out of the way first, understanding exactly what is FP&A, what it isn't, where it sits, and so on and so forth. Once we've done that, we get into the solution itself, and we're going to have a quick run through of some of the capabilities. Now, I must stress that the demonstration of the software today is really it's been put together to show the art of the possible. It's been put together to show the capability of the solution. So please don't think for a moment that if I'm talking about sales or revenue, but you're interested in expenses or FTEs, that capability is not inherent within the system. It's just a topic that I've chosen to sort of generically demonstrate, sort of top down, bottom up, the whole process of planning, the whole idea of collaboration, participation, ownership. The topics may very well be different from your requirements, but more than happy to dig into those requirements on a more individual basis. Now, because we're talking about planning, of course, there's going to be all the flexible features, workflow, disclosures, stuff like that I'll be talking about and touching on throughout. And as part of that, I've kind of put up there a couple of very specific applications, specific use cases, consolidations, and also the IFRS 16 application as well. Once we've run through all of the capabilities, like Sam said, we'll stop for Q&A. I've got my eye constantly on the chat, so if it's appropriate, I'll answer those. So, with no further ado, then let's get on to a little bit of positioning. And in fairness, I do use these slides a lot, so apologies if you've seen them before, but hopefully on a second viewing you might gain something different from them. So this is all about where does FP&A sit? In any organisation, and I find it's best to sort of start off taking a step back and think, well, really, or boil it down. What is it that we're all trying to do every day? And the way I'd like to position this is we're all asking ourselves 4 questions, hence I've labelled them the 4 big questions. Now, these questions are rooted in time, so they're time-based. How have we done? How did we do yesterday? How did we do last week, last month, last year? How are we doing today? So these different time-based perspectives. But then we start shifting that perspective and we look more into the future. Where are we going and what should we be doing? And although these last 2 questions might seem as though they're the same, I think there's some subtle nuances. There's some well, I say subtle, they're actually quite big differences, and I think they're very important to bring up. So let's talk about the first 2 questions first. How have we done? How are we doing? Typically, organizations equip themselves with execution systems, back-end systems of record, so ERP, talent management, financial management, data warehouse, you name it. Now, the reason that we do that, that our organizations do that, is because these systems of record, they enforce that consistent, standardized, predictable, reliable process. Once you've collected a piece of data, and we're all collecting potentially millions of bits of data every day, the moment you've collected it, you know everything about it. It's in the past. Even if it's only just happened, it's in the past, we know all about it. And that calls back to that consistent, standardized, predictable, reliable piece I was talking about. These systems are record perfect for that job, for that historical known quantity. Now, when we turn our attention to the next 2 questions, which albeit they're separated by only a very small gap on the PowerPoint, but in reality, that gap is huge. What do I mean by that? Well, the where are we going question. This is not about what's happened in the past. This is about what we don't know. This is stuff that's going to hit us downstream. Take the current climate where, COVID was, what was it? 1 week, it was nothing. The next week, suddenly we're all changing our lives. Brexit, murmurs, it's going to happen. Suddenly it happens. There's so many things that can happen to any organization on any day of the week that will directly and potentially drastically affect the health of that organization, the future outcome, the future direction of that organization. Up here are a few examples. So things like market variability, fluctuating demand, emerging markets, natural calamities, seasonality. I mean, you name it, that list goes on and on. And what is it? What's the answer? What do organizations, what do we turn to in order to answer this almost unanswerable question about us floating off into the unknown? Typically, we pick up or we turn to Excel in some way, shape or form. Which inherently there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I mean, look at this, a little green icon is sitting there all nice and friendly. But let's just take a moment to think about that status quo. What are we doing with those Excel like environments today? Well, in the context of planning, where we're saying, well, what happens if? Or I'm interested in a few people's opinions, so I'm going to send out this spreadsheet to collect those opinions to understand what the future might look like. Well, thinking about how that happens in Excel, we start off with our master Excel spreadsheet, maybe copy it over for the current month, check any errors. So now we've got 2 versions of that. We send it out on the mail server. There's now a version on the mail server. The individual opens up on their local machine. There's now a copy on their local machine, does some tweaks, change that, saves that as a new version. So you get the idea. We end up with these multiple versions of the truth, let alone ideas that, how easy is it to lean on your keyboard or put +6 at the end of a formula? The direction I'm trying to get to here is that little Excel icon. And I don't think this picture really paints the pain involved in this disparate, disconnected personal productivity tool. And that's the key here, is Excel is a personal productivity tool, yet we're using it as a business critical application to make decisions about the future health, the future direction of our organization. We're basing those decisions potentially on erroneous data, let alone the fact that the process I just spoke to you about, or I've described, probably takes up a huge amount of time. I mean, there's a quote banded about that anybody in this type of environment will typically spend 80% of their time, for want of a better word, messing about with Excel, 20% of their time actually doing their job. And that's the problem, especially when it comes to thinking about, well, we need to be reactive. We want to be able to make good decisions quickly. Yet here we are using the wrong tool for the right job. Now, if we then take that to the next step, and you'll see this question is still unanswered. I kind of wanted to get that feeling across, that we still got this unanswered question in all of this. What should we be doing? Well, you think about your current processes, collecting data on where are we going. The data you have collected in the how have we done and how are we doing today question. We got a lot of rich detail, a lot of rich information there, but we're probably not taking advantage of that. All of that detail we could be using to get some much better actionable insight from that data, realizing the value in the data. What I'm talking about here is being able to make trend-based plans, statistical forecasts. It loosely falls under artificial intelligence. And very few organizations actually start addressing this question because we're bogged down in that Excel nightmare that I've described. So I'm sure that kind of resonates with at least a few of you. Feel free to add any comments if you like. So let's now talk about Unit 4 FP&A and how that sort of plugs that gap, or at least bridges that gap between the past and the future. So Unit 4 FP&A is a performance management and analysis platform. Now, I kind of chose to use the word platform there for a reason. I'll probably come back to that in a moment. It manages data volumes, it manages complexity, but it still offers that flexibility, still offers that user acceptance that you'd expect of tools like Excel. Now, there's much more than just this. I mean, what I'm painting here at the moment is a single version of the truth. So kind of addressing my main objection, which is the multiple versions of the truth piece. But it's much more than just that. First of all, and you'll see it for yourself in a second. First of all, Unit 4 FP&A comes with, in fact, I've got a list. Let's bring that up there. There we go. I don't know if I'll address all of these. Keeping an eye on time, need to show you the products. Need to show you the products as well. But just to sort of maybe start at the top of the list at least and see where we go. So one of the added benefits of Unit 4 FP&A is it comes with pre-built, highly usable, configurable content around all things planning. So if it's financial planning, budgeting and forecasting we want to talk about, if it's consolidations, IFRS16, we've got an app for that. And this is all about accelerating time to value. So rather than reinventing the wheel, you've got your core financials out the box, connect them directly to your data sources, certainly Unit 4 data sources, fully integrated, plus third-party data sources, pull all of that data and structure in, and away you go. You've got your financial statements beginning to be available. However, every organisation is slightly different when it comes to planning. Some of us are more concerned about expense planning. Others are more concerned about, I don't know, strategic workforce planning or whatever it may be, sales planning, whatever it may be. So, of course, Unit4 FP&A also comes with sort of underpinning modelling and planning power. So we got out of the box content, but of course you can model any set of data in the shape, the size, the flow that meets and reflects the requirements of your data, and also the security requirements as well. We'll talk about security in a bit. I missed a point there, collaboration. The environment I spoke about earlier, that picture I painted, this is all about gathering opinions, understanding from the grassroots, what's going on, what do we think is going to happen. So it's about creating collaboration, creating ownership, increasing participation, and that's all about driving more trustworthy output. Talk more about trustworthy output, of course, in a moment. Ease of use, I'm going to let you decide as we step through in the next couple of minutes. I'll let you draw your own conclusions on that. But of course, a moment ago I was talking about the what should we be doing question within Unit4 FP&A. We've got baked in AI and also connectivity for other AI capability, which I'm happy to speak more about if there's any interest, maybe at a later date. Now, you may think, well, look, we don't need AI, we just need to be able to control the budget process. Of course, you fix today's problems, but at some point, AI is going to become more and more of a requirement when it comes to forward-looking capabilities. Certainly from the point of view of consensus planning, it's not just in my opinion, I think it's a 6. I can now start asking the solution for its opinion. I can augment that with my own experience of reality, and hopefully come up with a much more well-founded, a much more well-rounded output. So I'm able to plan and be a lot more confident that consistently we're getting much more correct figures as far as planning is concerned. Now, the other part to trust the data, trust in the plan data that we're creating, apart from asking the machine for its opinion, is understanding that data, understanding that information. And the way we can turn data into information is using graphical representations, interactivity. So you see the next 2 points down here, dashboarding, reporting. So it's rich, graphical, dynamic, interactive representations that allow us to dig in and understand that data, turn that data into actionable insight. And that's all about the self-service side of things. It's not just a case of here's a report or here's a data entry form, plug your figures in, let's go. It's a case of, well, maybe, we need to analyze and understand what's happened that will feed into that process. The final few points are just sort of nice to have. I think they sort of enrich that process. So alerts and notifications, rather than me having to log onto the system, where are we in the process? What do I need to do? The system can actually tell people, by the way, your task is due in 2 weeks or a week or what have you. Did you know your variance for this month has suddenly spiked at 5%? You better log on and have a look at what's going on. Notifications in the sense that every month I want my budget holders to receive their P&L, income expenditure, however you want to call it. So let's get that automatically sent out with the relevant context to them. So it's more of a call to action, but it makes the whole process more reactive, therefore saving time. People only get themselves involved in processes when they're needed. Full Microsoft Office integration. I gave Excel a bit of a bashing. Nothing wrong with Excel, it's a personal productivity tool, and you'll never get Excel out of finance. But you'll notice here I'm talking about full Office integration. So not only can you carry on using Excel as a window onto this single central version of the truth for analysis, for some write back, for reporting, you're also able to use Word, you're also able to use PowerPoint and connect directly to that single central version of the truth held within Unit4 FP&A. Last minute budget change, it updates the document. You can be sure that when you stand up and you're presenting back a board report, what have you, those numbers are most definitely the latest correct details. On cloud on premises 2021. So of course, you've got the choice and it's the same solution incidentally. So it's the same capability on either. So coming back, and you'll see all of this in the next sort of half hour. Coming back then to those 4 questions that I was sort of using as the backdrop to to understanding some of this positioning, I'm hoping that you can see how Unit 4 offers that, answers to those four fundamental questions, from the systems of execution all the way through to the emerging trends and capabilities around things like AI and everything in between, from data inception through to supported decision making. So with that, doesn't look like we've got any questions in the chat just yet. So if I press a couple of buttons here, let me share my screen, and I will have to come off camera for this. It's just a resourcing thing. My machine runs more quickly if I'm not using the resources. So I've currently got a web browser in front of me, and I'm going to just maximize that. Oh, let's maximize the right screen. There we go. And I am going to log on as administrator today. The reason I'm doing that is because then that way I can show you absolutely anything that comes to my mind. I go, oh, I need to show you this. I'm able to do that. But, rest assured that first of all, there's single sign-in integrated with the other Unit 4 portfolio, which is incredibly important. So single sign-on for that integrated user experience, single pane of glass. And on top of that, depending on who I sign on as, there's security baked in, there's security, configurable security within the solution itself. So people can only see and do what they're supposed to see and do. But like I say, in this case, I'm going to log in as administrator for today's purposes. So the thing that's greeting me here is a landing page, again, completely configurable per user. If I was a budget holder, perhaps the thing that I would end up looking at, when I first log on, is just my data entry form. I plug in the values that I need to plug in. I submit that task. I know attach an Excel spreadsheet that's got my calculations on a supporting documentation, and that's the end of my experience with the system. Alternatively, you might have something that looks a little more like this, where we've got a bit of a main menu, and here you can see some of the out-of-the-box content where I'm able to, go off and have a look at the profit and loss, the balance sheet, cash flow. As I say, this stuff is out of the box, the financial statements, so the core financials. And you might think, well, hang on here, what have we got for P&L? What's that, 5 or 6 views of the P&L? You wanted to create another report on that profit and loss. Well, of course you could. It's a very trivial task, that. The main thing is that content comes out of the box. In this case of loading up your chart of accounts, loading up your trial balance, defining that relationship between those core financials, P&L accounts, balance sheet accounts, cash flow, almost cyclic in some sense. And away you go. Of course, you want to create more reports, go for it. You want to create extra dashboards. We'll get into all of that shortly. And then we've also got some underpinning sort of sub-plans, everything that rolls up into those core financials. Today, I'm hoping that we might be able to touch on at least 1 or 2 tasks, depending on how we do for time. And the final thing I'll point out here is, if I really wanted to rip the lid off, I've also got this optional navigation pane where I might go ahead and try and find a dashboard, do a little search or interact directly with a worksheet in the form of a report or indeed a data entry form. I'm going to start off with a very generic example of some sort of reporting and some analysis, which then no doubt leads into a planning process. Now, all of these reports, and I use kind of reports as a catch-all term for data entry and analysis and so on. So all of these reports, first of all, a user can turn them into PDF or Excel files, or indeed the system can burst those out based on the context. Flick through the different areas, the relevant individual responsible for the relevant cost center will receive the relevant report, obviously with that context set. In this case, legal entity, profit center, cost center, just examples of dimensionality. This would be configured to contain the structure that relates to your organization. But as it goes, this is a financial statement we're looking at. Of course, your chart of accounts would appear here. Across the top, we're doing some comparators. So the current year actuals for the let's call it the current month compared to the prior month. We then got variance in absolute percentage terms, conditional formatting to highlight any outliers quickly and easily. Negatives are sometimes good. And again, we've got some indicators here to show us some overall month-on-month comparison. So pretty quickly, I can see that our income is our income from heating, electricity, whatever that may be in that particular account, has grown. Whereas also our travel expenses have grown, but only by 2.4% month on month. Graphical representations to underpin and highlight that detail. Of course, we're comparing this to the same month plan for the current year, variances in both absolute and percentage terms. Now, a report is a report, numbers are numbers, but if I'm looking at this, I want to be able to say, well, is there somewhere I need to look? Is there a problem here? Let me check my exceptional tolerance. It's currently set to 20%. Well, supposing I'm concerned with anything that is, 10%, or even let's go for 2%. Anything that then falls within that tolerance, anything where I've got a negative variance of more than 2% is highlighted. Go to 10%, fewer things are highlighted. So pretty quickly, I can see here, 83% are operating expenses. Now, as a user, I mean, what on earth's happening? So let's point and click and drill into that 533. And that 533, the next port of call is by cost center. So I now split that analysis out by cost center, and I can see really quickly here, conditional formatting, one cost center is causing a problem. Again, depicted in a graphical representation, where I can see that this large variance certainly wasn't planned for, and it appears to be unexpected. We didn't have the same sort of expenditure last year. Let's point and click and drill through on that number. So the next port of call then is splitting this out by account and also by time. So we've gone more and more detailed as we go through. Graphical representations to underpin that understanding and support that decision making. I can see we've got a bit of a spike in the 4th month, but that looks like it's expected. It happened last year. We planned for it to happen. However, in this month, we've got this large spike happening just here. The actual for the prior year was 215, and would plan for the current year was 266. So we expected some inflation, but 465 seems pretty high. Again, you'll notice that all of the selections have been passed through. Operating results, particular cost center, and so on. Let's now have a look at alerting in a slightly different way. So what we're doing here is comparing the amount that we're spending in this case, but the example is just expenditure. This, of course, could be income. We're looking at the values every month in comparison to where we should be in comparison to the total year to date so far. Well, the system's highlighting that 04 was a bit higher, but we expected that, whereas here in 06, definitely a problem. And it's one particular number or one particular area that seems to be causing that problem, which is maintenance of buildings. So when I point and click and highlight that row, it focuses the analysis. It's all about guiding the user, supporting the user, and making that information understandable and readily available. Let's have a look at what that 364, where did that come from? So with a point and click there, I've performed a drill through to the underlying SQL database. And of course, we've got integration with our own source system. So this could be Unit4 ERP. This could be Unit4 Financials. We've got full integration with those products, both from a pulling data and pushing data point of view. In this example, here's all of the transactions that made up that actual number. Let's just filter those by amount, and I can now see pretty quickly my flood repair. So we had an unexpected flood, it seems, and we've ended up having to spend that extra money. So what I'm able to do, and it looks like I've already didn't clear out this part of the demo, I've already added a comment in there. So flood repair exceptional, and this is so exceptional expense. May as well finish off the note. And anybody who looks at buildings maintenance now sees that number is going to see this comment. That comment is stored alongside the numbers within the same database, subject to the same security. And that's also true for things like attachments as well, so Word documents and so on and so forth. Now, okay, we found a problem, but how does that feed into anything else that we're working on? Well, when you think about the nature of planning and forecasting and reacting to the changes that are going on in the world, of course, the plan for the current year is going to be based on or needs to take into account that number. So when it comes to things like forecasting, let's have a look at the different options we've got here. When it comes to things like forecasting in the current year, I'm able to see now in this forecast, we've got actuals up until the 6th month because those things have happened. But from that 7-month onward, we're now forecasting our data. Now, I might have an opinion about what's going to change based on the fact that that number, that flood repair occurred. So being able to see all of that on one screen, perform all of that analysis, understand where we have come from and why, that's going to directly feed into my opinions about the future. In this case, happen to be talking about forecast. And of course, there's a bunch of different forecasting capabilities. In this case, this is a straightforward blend of our actuals plus our plan or budget figures. But of course, just to show you another simplistic example of a forecast here, we've also got the capability of performing reallocation. So we've got our actual data up until current month, followed by a reallocation of our plan figures, 3275, in order to get back to the 3275. So in order to hit the targets that we set ourselves, what do we need to do versus what happens if we just continue on the same track? And there's a bunch of other capabilities around forecasting. See if I can get rid of this this little thing. Of course, there's a workflow associated with this. So when it comes to the idea of collecting figures, say for next year's plan, I might want to have those reviewed and revised or accepted, rejected before I move through the process with that. I'm just going to take you through, point out one other thing, and then take you through a bit of dashboarding as well, point out some workflow and so on. All of the reports I've looked at so far are single interfaces. Instead of having multiple spreadsheets per month, per area, I've got one report and I can change all of those items, and I only ever have to worry about this one thing. I don't have to create and maintain multiple different reports, and multiple users can work with the same object based on security. They might not be able to see all of the accounts. They might not be able to see all of the options and so on. But rather than having those multiple Excel spreadsheets, I've just got one interface there. Let's just have a very brief chat about workflow. In fact, I have a feeling that if I click here, yes, my workflow's already, it's an example of workflow that's been done. So, workflows, a number of different ways that workflow could be used. It doesn't have to be used, but the idea of how can we use workflow to really join people up, to get increased participation in the process, and also to map exactly to the processes that we're working with. In this case, this workflow process is actually a number of different things rolled into one. We've got some target setting. So the way this process works is we start off setting the target from a top level. How much do we want to make? How many people do we need? How much are we going to spend? We spread that out across the regions, across products or projects, whatever it may be, throughout time, make sure we've got the right resources. And then we've got a bottom-up process once we set that target. Let's pass this out to the budget holders to get their opinion about, can we hit these numbers? These are the target. This is what we want to do. And when you think about that process, that's all about connecting strategy to execution. And all too often, with an Excel disconnected environment, the idea of the strategy, what is it we're trying to do as an organization, is completely lost. It becomes people entering values into spreadsheets for the sake of doing that job. Whereas here you can see this process is about setting that strategy and then working out how we're going to execute it, all in a controlled manner with that relevant security, so we know who's doing what. We can track and trace all of those different tasks, who's done what, where are we in the process. Back on the task that isn't started, of course, this could be entered out and reused every month if so we desired. So if it's a monthly process, of course, you could have every month. You could have things like due dates. You could add a number of different columns. This is just an example of capability. Here I've got a trigger email. So marketing, we're waiting for your numbers. Hit the email button. Marketing receives an email. Please log onto the system. We're not waiting for your numbers. Again, the fact that if the CRO logs on, the CRO only sees the tasks that they need to concern themselves with. Let's just have a quick jump through one or two tasks, and then I want to move on to some dashboards. The reason I wanted to sort of spend a moment looking at this is that idea of freeform layout. It is cell-based, so it is kind of very similar to Excel in that sense, but you've got that capability of really laying this out in the way that you want it laid out. Now, this demo happens to be about revenue, happens to be about selling things, so we've got stock capacity. But the point is a number is a number. So, if this was about tins of cat food, if it was about square foot, number of hours that people work, the point here is that you could display all of that rich detail that feeds into your plans, all that operational drivers that feed into your plan can be displayed to the relevant person in a very easily consumable format. Things that I care about within the context of this task is how have we performed financially year on year? Well, let's look at the graphical representations. Our plan was pretty high and we have done an appalling job at hitting that, apart from last year where we realigned the plan and in fact we managed to do pretty well. Indicators to draw our eye very quickly, what's going well, what's not going well. We got some good growth. This was expenses. You'd expect that to be red, of course. And last year was the only year that we actually achieved plan. By the way, gauges, I've learnt that these can be quite an emotive topic. You don't have to use gauges. Some people have quite a hatred for them. I didn't think they were too bad. I thought I'd pop them on, but you get the idea. You wanted to have a bar graph, a pie graph, a donut, waterfall. Up to you. What representation suits your information? Got some room for some more stock. Yeah, think about that. That could be hours. We got more hours that people sitting on the bench that could be used. Marketing budget that's available. Now, because this process is all about joining people together, people speak, as you know, using words. And so, of course, within the solution itself, we can type away. And this is all about sharing, that if we think about executing strategy, this is about sharing that common goal with all of the players. So here's what I've gleaned: consistently missing plan figures, growth is in decline, and so on and so forth. What are we going to do? We need to increase sales FTEs. We need to launch new products, whatever it may be. And let's get that message out to the users. Let's make sure we're all aligned and we're all trying to face and achieve the same common goals. What I'm going to do here, though, is I'm going to set my target. I'm going to say, I think we're going to behave similarly to how we have done so far. So 39.7 million. However, I want to grow by 1%. I think my finger pressed the delete button instead of the 0. There you go. I want to grow by 10%. Let's be aggressive. So a 10% growth is 43 million. So let's round that out to something nice and 45 million. And you may notice everything's updating. So our stock capacity is telling me, well, if you do 45 million, and if that was hours, then this is how many hours you're going to need. This is how much square foot you'll need. This is how much petrol you'll consume, whatever it may be. So I've said I want to achieve 45 million. In this case, happens to be sales. I can now kick that workflow process off. This then alerts the relevant individuals to say, I've set the target. Please log on, get on with your task. So I've set my 45 million based on all of the details I've gleaned, how well we're performing, market share, and so on and so forth. Let's jump back to our workflow there. And the moment I've done that, you'll notice that everything's updated. The regional target's now in progress. Target setting's been approved. Let's take on the guise of, in this case, sales, but please bear in mind that, this doesn't have to be a sales orientated task. Data is just data. This could be expenses we're talking about here. This could be number of hours, as I say. Okay. So we're now looking, again, free-form layout. Here I've got a depiction of my organization from total regions, which could be, head office and split into different operational areas. This happens to be split by geography. North, south. Got 3 regions in the north, 3 regions in the south. Looking at the analysis, we can see that 45 million has already been allocated based on how we spent the money last year. So how we, the actual current year, so 39.7. That's a 13% increase across the board. However, planning's not like that, is it really? We've got other strategic things that we want to achieve. At the moment, we're looking at, in the north, 22 million, and that's 49% of its parent. But as a company, we're going to focus on the north, and we're going to look at trying to grow that area of the organization to 52%, which means we're only going to have 48% over on the south side. So that's only a 7% increase versus a 20% increase. It's very much like a goal seek exercise. And bear in mind, this is just an example of capability. You can bend this capability to any subject that you face as far as planning is concerned. And again, that takes us into more detail. Down here, we've got a 20% increase, 8.7. Let's make that 9.5. I want to make 9.5 in region 1. We've got a big marketing campaign that's going on over there. And you'll see as the moment I do that, we get a reallocation of the target over here, so that these target numbers, you'll see in the bottom right hand side, 23.4, always add up to the regional target, which will always add up to the total. So from a top-down perspective, I've got full control over that budget balancing capability. Now, the other side to this, which I just spent a couple of minutes on, I got a keen eye on time, want to get through some dashboarding as well. The other side to this is it's all very well that we want to make 23 million, or that we want to spend X amount of money, or we want to achieve this amount of productivity. Do we have the resources in place to do that? So I've got some more operational drivers here in the form of FTEs, but of course this could include anything related to your organization. It could be different per region. Number of beds, amount of tons of waste that needs to be shifted, whatever it may be. In this case, it's FTE, it's common to all of us. Last year we did 7 million. We did this with 3.5 FTEs who achieved 127% quota. If we carry on achieving 127% quota with 3.5 FTEs, you will get 7.2 million. Now, supposing my workforce are slightly demotivated, they only hit their quota. The system is telling me then you need to increase your FTEs from 3.5 to 5.83. If I do that, just hit this little blue stripe in the middle, then it tells me you're going to hit your target. Well, let's just see what happens if we were to go with 6 FTEs. If you went with 6 FTEs, you're going to end up with 9.7 million. The point of this is not, yes, you can do FTE. This is about strategy planning at a high level, connecting an organization. Do the resources we have to get to where we want to be align with the decisions that we're making in order to achieve that journey? So I'm hoping that comes across, that constraint-based planning there. I think it's incredibly important. Of course, there's workflow associated with that, so we can track that's been done. The next task has to be looked at. One thing I will do very briefly is let's just have a quick look at a dashboard. Just take a moment to talk through this. And creating a dashboard is a pretty menial task as well, pretty straightforward thing to do. I'll show you some of the capabilities that we've got here, and I think you'll get an idea of how you go about creating them. So all of these graphical representations are all interactive. So if I decide I want to take tools out of that, or garden tools, whatever it might be, you can see how that image is updating. It might make more sense if I drill through, for example, first. Let's drill down on our garden tools, and here we've got a number of different products. And as I'm hovering my mouse over, you see that lawn trimmers getting in the way of my analysis. Let's get rid of that. What's the next one down? So as I'm moving my cursor down, I can see the different areas that are responsible. So I can move those items out, perform that analysis that I'm interested in. Again, drilling through where I need to, understanding where do we come from, drilling back up to again get to those variances. Or indeed hit my little do more button, which takes me out into an interactive environment where I might say actually a table is what I'm after. Really quickly and easily using my mouse. And this is not something every user would have to do. But using my mouse in this example, I can point and click and control what I'm looking at and how I'm interacting with it. Make it look nicer, some commas. So look at that straight away. I can see in-house in this area. So what's that? Garden tools. Seems to be the biggest area in my organization. So that's the biggest channel. Of course, there's the idea of pivoting. I'm no longer interested in logistics. Let's pop that back up. I'd like to, I know, swap this with regions. I can simply drag and drop. Let's have a look at the regions by actual current year. Looks like everything's going on in Germany, So that whole idea of just pointing and clicking and choosing what you want to look at, then from a user's perspective, turning that into a graphical representation that supports that interactivity, a waterfall graph out the box. I mean, this isn't great data to do a waterfall graph on, but you get the idea. You can point and click and you've got a bunch of capability around how that waterfall graph works. That's all about understanding the data as you're working with it. We've touched on a bit of the planning. We've touched on a bit of the exploration side as well. The last piece I want to cover today, apart from a few more comments that I may have, is the Microsoft Office integration. So, as an example, you'll notice here I've got a Unit4 FP&A Word add-in. I'll just show you that so I can connect to my server. Let me show you what it's doing. If I highlight this, anything highlighted in grey is coming from FP&A. If there's a last minute journal, if there's a last minute, in your source systems, if there's a last minute budget change, it will flow through to this document. I can control which month I'm looking at. I can control which area of the organization I'm looking at. So this then becomes a template that can be reused every month, and I don't have to keep coming in and copying and pasting and making those errors. Also, significant overspend, that's coming from FP&A. It's being calculated based on the variance percentage, or this percentage here, the total year to date variance. So significant, slight overspend. It's able to calculate that sentiment. And then further to that, something we haven't touched on today, but certainly if you're interested, we could talk about it at some point, is then the actual sentiment. So the more public facing, let's say, sentiment, rather than, internal commentary. This is much more at a high level. All of that, we're pinning comments to specific areas. This is one I did just before we start this session. So an adverse variant of that number, it's been calculated for me. Total cost accounts is where it comes from 40 neighbourhood services, and new comments is what I wrote up here. The hire freezes forced extra spend on external costs. If we move forward to next month, this will change as well. The content will change, the data will change, everything will move forward. And that whole process is being managed incidentally within FP&A. As the final sort of flick up, I've noticed I don't think there's been many chat questions. Let's click that. There we go. Final thing here, again, we got the Excel add-in with live links back to FP&A. If I change from plan current year to plan next year, we're now looking at the data related to that. Let's change this value here. Plan next year, I'm going to 500,000, that's 500,000 in a 06 for maintenance and buildings. Let's refresh that value, and you'll see now that if I log in through a web browser, through Word, through Excel, through PowerPoint, I will see that 500,000, given I've got security rights to it. I mean, today, it was on the agenda. I didn't manage to get round to having a peek at it, but certainly other things, like consolidations, the IFRS, so financial consolidation, statutory consolidations, IFRS 16 is single sign-on supported. Yes, it is. In fact, to tell you what, I'm going to come back to those questions in just a moment. Then finish my little spiel I'm on. So IFRS 16, financial consolidations, industry models, so different verticalizations, financial models. We've got pre-built applications that come with best practices, serve as a basis for an implementation. But of course, it's a modeling tool, so you're able to bend it in the way that suits your organization. The other thing about FP&A is it's a journey. Choose somewhere to start and grow, rather than let's join strategy to execution. Start somewhere and grow, and that's where you'll get to. So with that, and again, an eye on time, let me have a quick look at some of these questions that come in. Could the majority of this be done with Encoder, Excel, Word? We currently use management accounts. So yes, if we pick up the topic of the Excel integration and the Word integration, of course, there's other ways of integrating into Excel, Stuart. Coda has that capability. But when you take this in the context of the wider remit, so the fabric of the stuff we've been speaking about today, which is about planning, which is about that allocation, we set that figure, we allocated it throughout the organization, the process of collecting that data, being able to spin up new versions. So scenario planning on the fly, what happens if we do this? What happens if we do that? Making that process much more agile. Then that's where you start getting that separation between simply, effectively, budget collection and an actual FP&A performance management process. So you're right, there is overlap there, but I'm hoping that you can see the context is a much broader FP&A one. Happy to discuss that further. Guest 24, can we dynamically link to Power BI or Tableau? So yeah, you've seen the dashboard in the self-service analytics capability within FP&A, so you can perform analysis at runtime, but you want to push this out to your data warehouse that feeds Tableau or Power BI. Yes, you can. You could do a direct ODBC out on that if you want to, or maybe your organization might want a more managed way of doing that, which is entirely feasible. Short answer is yes. Carolina, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is single sign-on supported, as I think we touched on it earlier. Yes, it is. So the user experience would be. And then Stuart, hi Oliver, how does the data from Unit4 financials link into FP&A? So that's a direct integration point. We're able to pull out both structure, so like your chart of accounts, your organizational structure, pull it into FP&A, and then also push the data back out if that were a requirement. And that's all done as part of the integration that Unit4 offers. I'd be happy to go into more detail with you or anyone else on that at a time when we've got maybe a bit more time. But suffice to say, yes, we integrate to Unit4 source systems, you know. So I think those are all the questions. I have gone a minute over. Apologies for that, Sam. Apologies for that, everyone. But hopefully that's been a a good way of spending an afternoon, at least.
We will forgive you, Oliver. Thank you very much. That was a fantastic overview. Of course, following this webinar, if you do have any questions regarding FP&A or interest in a demo, please get in touch. This session has also been recorded. So if you'd like a copy, please just drop me an email and I can get that over to you. So thank you very much for attending all, and thank you, Oliver.
Thanks so much for your time, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye now.
Thank you, Oliver.